Well, the time has come at the 2021 Virtual Railroad Hobby Show here at Virtual Railfan to unveil our second museum quality locomotive. You know, our first museum quality locomotive is the Big Blow turbine, and that one was a huge locomotive. This time, we go in a totally different direction. Let's learn more now. So our first museum quality locomotive, of course, is the 3-unit Big Blow turbine, and that's a monster locomotive. Now we're going to flip the table and we're going to go to one of the smallest locomotives. The tagline for museum quality is Legendary Locomotive, and if you're a Milwaukee Road modeler, this is definitely legendary. We're talking about the EMD SDL39. This unique locomotive was first built in the late 1960s. Milwaukee Road went to EMD and said, hey, we need a locomotive that will operate on our light rail and light bridges in the upper Midwest. And we needed something that will pull a heavy train but spread that weight out. And what they came up with was a 6-axle locomotive, essentially in a 4-axle body. Now, like all of our museum quality locomotives, it's packed with the rivet counter detail and a little bit more. The real difference here is we're talking about legendary locomotives. Now there are a couple more features that this one has that a traditional rivet counter will not. You've got things like cab interior light, you've got the control stand light, and then of course we've also got the curved squeal and the frog clank sound. So let's start with Milwaukee. The first 5 were delivered in 1969 and the next 5 in 1972. And on the first delivery of 5, this is the as-delivered version. One of the big spotting features between the first run and the second run are the snow shields. Another spotting feature is if we look at the end of the short hood, you'll notice that there are louvers for the heating. There's also louvers on the front of the cab on the engineer's side. And of course you've got the all-weather window. The first run, production run, didn't have the winterization hatch. They are all non-dynamic brake. And then Milwaukee was also known for their small fuel tanks. Of course, this is the short fuel tank. You'll see the fuel fill, the gauges, the sight glasses. And as you look, this one has it on both sides, and whereas the later ones may have it on just one side. And as we look at the different fuel tanks as we move through, you'll see some are just a standard fuel tank. Some have knuckles holders on the front of the tank. One has knuckle holders on the rear of the tank. And as time went on, they actually added a waste retention tank. On the second grouping, the snow shields were not present. You'll notice the winterization hatch has been added, a beacon, a different type of e-bell on the roof, and then of course a ton of different features. You've got things like ground lights on both sides of the locomotive. On these you have class lights, so you can cycle between red, white, green, and off. You've got lit number boards, of course lit headlights front and rear, and then a ton of special details. You'll notice a couple of different styles of coupler cut levers, several different snow plows, and on these early units they actually had e-bells and 2 different versions of e-bells on the 2 Milwaukees. They were soon converted to a standard steel bell, which is mounted on the left-hand side just behind the fireman's side. The locomotives, of course, feature all of the other things that you've come to expect, like tread plate detail, see-through steps, separately applied grab irons, tons of individual parts. And of course, on the Milwaukees, you're going to notice too that the later ones were delivered with the beacon, and as the beacon flashes, you'll see it kind of strobe up and strobe down. So a lot of special details on the Milwaukee Road. Milwaukee was the only original buyer of these locomotives. When Milwaukee was sold out to the Sioux Line, they moved to this second version. So after the Sioux Line purchased the Milwaukee Road, they inherited the SDL39s and they painted them in what's called the Bandit paint scheme. Essentially, they just painted out all of the Milwaukee markings and never actually moved these to the full repaints in the red and white Sioux Line. The other big change that happened on the locomotives, you'll notice they moved away from an E-bell to a standard steel bell and mounted it just behind the cab. There's 3 different versions of Bandit, and they all have subtle, small paint differences. On the Sioux, even the as-delivered units, they had the winterization hatches added, and of course the second production run in Milwaukee had the winterization hatch already installed. So after the Sioux Line came the Wisconsin Central. And the SDL39s, some are in the early paint scheme that WC had. You'll notice we've got them separated into two groups here. This is the early group and the later group. The later ones actually have operating ditch lights. And the SDL39s, some are in the early paint scheme that WC had with the kind of the cream scheme, and you'll notice this early version has the standard lettering, whereas the later version has a very non-standard lettering. Notice little things like the colors of grab irons. Some are going to be white, some are maroon, some are the cream, and some are the deluxe gold color. Another big spotting feature on these is you've got the original air filters, and then of course on this particular model is the later air filter. You've also got a little bit different snowplow arrangement on these, and then when you get into the ditch light version, one of the things you'll notice in the video is the really rapidly alternating back and forth ditch lights, and that was prototypical to Wisconsin Central. Also, take a look at some of the small details as you go to our website and you look at the photos of the model and the artwork. You'll see things like some grab irons are white, some are maroon, some are the cream color, some are the gold color. You'll notice number board changes. Instead of having black number boards with white numbers, this particular unit has white number boards with black numbers in it. We also did all of the small features, so take a really close look at the artwork to see all of the differences. The last version is FEPASA. This is our first locomotive outside of North America. This particular railroad operates in Chile. And you'll notice one of the really unique spotting features are the etched metal wire screens that cover up all of the windows on this particular unit. It also still retained its class lights and as well as its flashing front and rear ditch lights. One of the big changes on this locomotive is they moved the horn from the top of the cab to back on the side of the long hood with a really long standoff. Of course, the bright yellow handrails. They removed the front snow plows, kept the weed cutter plows on the rear, and then one of the big spotting features, 2345 has the black Hyatt bearing caps, whereas 2349 has the red Hyatt bearing caps. There's a lot more features that we could talk about on these locomotives, but the best thing to do is to go to our website. We've spent a ton of time listing every single feature that these locomotives have to show you why, even at the price point, it's still a great value. Now, one of the other things too for this locomotive, this is more on the collector end. So we've got a new box this time, but it's going to be a very special presentation box for this locomotive. We're looking for delivery for these just before Christmas this year, so you can put these on your Christmas list or, of course, shop for someone. We're taking pre-orders on these now at our website, which is scaletrains.com, and at select retailers. Thanks so much for tuning in.